Good morning. Thank you. Welcome to the final four round of the American Farm Bureau Federation's Young Farmers and Ranchers Discussion Meet. I'm Craig Vaughn of the American Farm Bureau Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee, and I'm from the state of North Dakota. I will be serving as your room chair for this round. At this time, out of respect for the competitors, please turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices. Also, please keep distractions as minimal as possible to allow for full concentration by our competitors. In the event of continual distractions, it may be necessary for me to ask you to leave the room. At this time, we would like to invite anyone, photographers in particular, to come up and sit in our reserved front row. Serving as our moderator for this round is Russ Kohler of the AFBF yf&R Committee from the state of Utah. Serving as our timekeeper is Grant Coffey of the AFBF Committee from Virginia. The winner of each discussion meet Sweet 16 round has advanced to this Final Four. The judges, timekeeper, and competitors have been briefed as to the rules of the competition. At this time, I will yield control to our room moderator, Russ.
Thank you, Craig. We appreciate all of you taking time to attend the competition today. Your support is appreciated by the competitors. Competitors, please come up and take your places up front. Now that all the competitors have been seated, writing is allowed. As our room chair has mentioned, the competitors have been briefed on the competition and realize that their general discussion should be directed towards each other rather than the audience. In my role as moderator, I will not attempt to control or direct this discussion. Remember, the discussion is meant to resemble a committee meeting with the end goal of determining possible solutions to the question at hand. This is not a panel discussion with point, counterpoint, and an active moderator. As such, I will not intervene unless or until disparaging or inappropriate remarks are made. With that in mind, the burden is on the competitors to moderate themselves and conduct themselves in a cooperative and congenial manner. The question for the final round is, farmers are a shrinking percentage of the population. How can Farm Bureau help first-generation farmers and ranchers get started in agriculture? Competitors, congratulations on your advancement to the Final Four. The competitors for this round are Jenny Freeborn of Oregon, Jared Knock of South Dakota, Martha Smith of Colorado, and Matt Jakubik of Michigan. We will begin this discussion with 30-second opening statements from each competitor. Following the opening statements will be 30 minutes of open discussion, followed by 1 minute of quiet time for the competitors to prepare their 1-minute closing statements. The official time is kept by our timekeeper, Grant. Competitors, in voluntary order, you may stand and give your 30-second opening statements. Direct your opening statement to the audience. The timer will indicate when your 30 seconds have elapsed by holding up a red card. You may begin.
Traditional agriculture lends itself to efficiency. Therefore, we've seen a consistent decline in the percentage of the population involved in production agriculture. Is it realistic to expect this percentage to grow? Entering production agriculture comes with many challenges. It's key to understand what areas new producers can be successful in so we can assist them with transition, training, and support programs. To that end, we need to explore how Farm Bureau can partner with other organizations to help interested parties in both entering and succeeding in the industry.
According to USDA data, over the past 30 years, the percentage of new farmers has decreased from 38% of all farmers to just 17% of all farmers. Yet a quick Google search will show you that there are a host of programs available to aid beginning farmers and ranchers. My challenge to those of us here today is what can we as Farm Bureau do to help farmers that are beginning farmers successfully access these programs while we also identify new programs with new funding sources?
What do you want to be when you grow up? This is the typical question asked in front of every kindergarten and elementary classroom. However, 9 times out of 10, what we're hearing is not farmers or ranchers. We're hearing veterinarians, we're hearing lawyers, and doctors. Farm Bureau is in a very unique opportunity in which we can provide information and avenues in which we can provide information for new ways that farmers and ranchers can get involved in the industry.
When I was a senior in high school, I cut a photograph out of a farm magazine of a child in a wheat field staring at the sky. And the caption read, "What if a child dreamt of being a farmer, but settled for being an astronaut?" Many in this country dream of being farmers. Where will the next generation of U.S. farmers and ranchers come from? What tools and resources will they need for their success? And how can we reinforce the value of Farm Bureau membership to this new group?
You have heard the opening statements. The competitors may now proceed with the discussion. Competitors, please direct your discussion to your fellow panel members.
I think the great thing that we brought up, all of us in our opening statement, especially Jenny, you brought it up, is the greatest problem here in agriculture is the cost startup. Cost startup is going to be our number one issue. As we take a look at a lot of these things, land is skyrocketing around everywhere, and we're not making any more of it. So that cost issue of land availability is one of those high number one problems that I see within this issue.
Another thing that, Martha, you brought up that I really liked in your opening was the fact that USDA shows that there's a decreasing number of beginning farmers and a decreasing number of farmers overall, of course, as we know. One of the things that I found in my research that I thought was really cool and really exciting and kind of maybe a glimmer of hope for this is that the 2014 USDA census actually showed there was a 2.2% increase in farmers between the ages of 25 and 35. Now, that's something that has only happened once before in the last century. And they did some additional research on that, basically that segment of the industry, and found that they were highly educated. 69% of them had college degrees. That's higher than the general population. And so I think that that's a really interesting point. And Jared, I'd like to hear your thoughts on maybe where that's coming from and some other thoughts that you have on this issue.
I think it becomes a renewed focus on and the opportunities that exist in agriculture. And Matthew touched on that a little bit about the industry opportunities as well as the opportunities directly in agriculture. As basically a child of the 1980s farm crisis, I lived in rural America my whole life and saw what that did to the center part of to farmers throughout the nation. And it took a long time for that to heal. But I know there was a lot of us through that time frame that were really challenged and said, we don't want to give up on this way of life. We don't want this to go away. And regardless of how the challenges that we experienced when we were growing up, we want to make a commitment to save this. And I won a college scholarship on an essay called Rural Exodus. And it was because this hollowing out of the center of America that we saw of the people just leaving our countryside. And we want that to change. We want that to return so that we're not just adding new farmers in states with farmers markets and access direct to consumers, but everywhere throughout the nation in all 50 states. Martha, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. I wanted to actually tap back to what Jenny was saying there around the numbers from that last census, because it was really interesting. And the way that USDA determines what a beginning farmer and rancher is if they have less than 10 years of experience as a farmer. And so when you dig into that data, what's also interesting is there was an increase in young farmers. There also was an increase in the number of beginning farmers and ranchers over the age of 65. So when you think about that, that's retirees who are now deciding to become farmers. So I think when we think about this topic today, we have to realize that while young farmers are a component of it, there's a lot more to agriculture of people who are entering at maybe a different time than what we've seen in the past. Have any of y'all seen that in your areas?
And tagging on to more of your data before I go into that area, if we take a look at those young farmers that were joining in a lot of them made less than $500,000. It wasn't those big numbers that we're seeing where maybe it's a succession plan or maybe it's a taking over, but it is a small niche value-added farmer coming into that industry. I know in our area with Michigan, we're extremely diverse with fruits and vegetables and dairy, and we are seeing that increase, especially what Jenny mentioned earlier with the college degrees of people entering in. They want that food, they want to know where it's coming from, and they're building on those things. And I think there's opportunities that lie within that information, because currently right now, if we take a look at it, if we look at the USDA loan program system, the Young Farmer program, it's designed either for people of different backgrounds that may not be traditional, or you have to have 3 to 5 years of experience. And so you have to be really critical on how you're taking a look at that loan application, because it is a daunting task. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it is a very lengthy application, and having a way to understand how to fill that out is extremely crucial. I think Farm Bureau can play that role.
And Matt, I think that that's a great point, and that's something that is very true. You said a couple things. One thing I wanted to come back to that you said is the desire to know where our food comes from. That's not just in this country, that's worldwide. In the UK, there's a coffee shop, a single coffee shop, that has a program where they're bringing coffee in from Uganda, from one farm, and they're able to sell that coffee at an 18% markup just because they can tell the story. Millennials have this desire to know where our food comes from. And in the statistics that I think, Martha, you must have seen the same article that I did, that it talked about how those millennials, part of the reason they went back to the farm is because they wanted that life. They wanted the hands-on experience. And that's a place that first-generation farmers are coming in. And that's a place that Farm Bureau can really tap into that group. Another thing I just wanted to hit on really quick, because you guys have talked about it a little bit, is the farm programs. Matt, this is kind of what you were talking about. One of the things that I noticed in my research is they are restrictive in a manner. I have a first-generation farmer that's a friend of mine in my state, and I spoke with her about this topic, and she was like, well, I'd farmed part-time for 12 years. So by the time I started farming full-time and needed the assistance, I didn't qualify anymore. I was too old, and I'd been filing Schedule F for too long. What do you guys think are some ways some solutions that we could look at for that?
But before we even go, if you don't mind, before we go to the solution part there, I think another thing to realize, something I saw in my own family, is when my brother came back from college and a few years later decided he wanted to buy his own land, piece of property came available, and he went into the local USDA office to understand what were the options, and they told him it was going to be a 6 to 8 month process before he would be eligible. And on top of that, they wanted an enterprise budget. I don't know about y'all, but I don't think most college grads, let alone someone without a college degree, knows what a enterprise budget is. And the sad part about that is two things. One, I've never seen a good piece of property that sits on the market for 6 to 8 months unless there's something wrong with it or it's priced too high. And the other thing is that it was easier for him to go through the commercial lending process. It would have even been easier just to buy a house through the FHA program, the new homeowner program. So I wonder what we can do to even work better within our governmental agencies to find ways to streamline this. Looks like you have a thought.
No, I just think it's interesting as we talk about the different challenges that we have from different age groups and different programs and what challenges and opportunities they hold. It answers the question of where the next generation of first farmers are coming from. Like I said, it's not just one group, it's a multiplicity of different angles. It's first generation immigrants, it's baby boomers, it's millennials, and they all have very specific challenges, right? And so the baby boomers probably don't have the same need for access to capital like a millennial does. And at the same time, they may need totally different resources. We have a young farmer rancher program, but the idea that there's a whole nother group, a 55 and over new farmer program that Farm Bureau could activate and invigorate, and I'd be curious to know if there's any states that have something like that to make sure that there's needs addressed for those new farmers.
And I think, Jared, that brings up the real third issue here, and it's a visibility issue. What is visible, what is out there, and what can happen with it? Because if we take a look at what you're saying, generationally, there's nothing available for those people, and they don't know how to get it. I mean, if you start typing in farmer loan or farmer grants, you get bombarded with junk, and it's emails, and your name gets passed around, and it's not anything good. There's not solid, concrete information. And like you're saying, there's a group out there that maybe doesn't fit in. Maybe it doesn't fit in with the traditional like we're talking about. And how do we tap into that? How do we make that information visible to them, I think, is that third problem.
And one of the things that I had thought of and seen in going through AFBF policy and our state's policy on this is we don't have anything that specifically says first-generation farmers, that specifically is support for first-generation farmers. There are college loan programs for first-generation college attendees. Why can't we have a program that supports first-generation farmers? You know, the 2018 Farm Bill is coming up, and Farm Bureau has always been very supportive of the USDA dollars that go towards the Beginning Farmer program, the Veteran program, these things that are already existing, and that's some things that Farm Bureau already does. But what about trying to add some language into both AFBF policy and to USDA for specifically first-generation farmer loans?
I think that's a great idea, and I think one of the things we may not have addressed it on a national level yet, but I do see some creativity throughout the states. For example, the state of Illinois has hired a sustainability specialist, which specifically focus on first-generation farmers, local food hubs, and other avenues because Illinois is the third largest state in the country for farmers markets, and so finding a need, developing a solution at a state level. Again, we have multiple different levels that we can tackle the problem with Farm Bureau. I think it'd be great to have some national policy, Jenny, that gives some insight and some direction to state and county level Farm Bureaus in order to help that cause.
Yeah, I think policy is a great idea, but kind of want to tap back into what you were saying there too, because like I mentioned in my intro, there are just a slew of programs. It really is overwhelming. But did you guys happen to see the website, the newfarmers.usda.gov? So I hadn't heard of that before I started, practicing for our discussion here today. And that was an initiative of Secretary Vilsack, where he realized that there were all these different programs that were happening and it wasn't being streamlined into one place. And that's the point of that website. It seems like such a great starting point, but I wonder how we can take that to the next level, because the reality is those programs are still really confusing and complicated, and we need to find ways to cut the red tape so that farmers can actually access this. Some of the farmers that I know that have started first-generation farms have said that they needed a law degree to be able to even understand the language in it, let alone be able to successfully fill out the application.
And in Farm Bureau, we have great opportunities because we need to remember Farm Bureau is that grassroots opportunity. Yes, we build policy and we use that to drive, but we also employ experts. I know in our state we have lawyers and we have dairy experts and we have all those people. We need to get that information out more readily available. We need to have opportunities. I know in our county fair, we have a Farm Bureau booth. Having somebody sitting there a lot of times is what it takes, because somebody may come up and go, hey, I'm interested in beekeeping, because we know those niche markets. We already talked about that early on. How can I get started with that? And that's that first dialogue that needs to start. And even if we don't have something at our county level that's based within there and that knowledge principle, we can direct them to the right sources, because that's where it's really crucial is we can build from that bottom up.
I wonder with that if there's an opportunity for a mentoring program or something like that. Maybe we could even tap into former yf&R chairs or committee members from the state or from AFBF who could help to provide some expertise on how to do that. What was your thought, Jenny?
Martha, I wanted to pull back just a hair to the land grant conversation we were having. We mentioned land grant universities. My friend in Oregon that I was talking about earlier, when I was speaking with her, I was like, well, are you a Farm Bureau member? Well, yes, but only because my insurance required it. And she's talking about, it was just like, wow. And she was talking about when she got started trying to find enterprise budgets, trying to find all of those things that they need and, all of the resources. And she's like, we just did a lot of trial and error and we looked through our land grant. And I'm like, Farm Bureau has programs. We have health and safety programs. We have training programs. We have conferences like this one where you can learn a lot. And she was so intimidated by our organization. One thing that I found in my research and talking to in fact, it was our state executive director that I was talking to, is there was a committee, and I actually wrote the name of it down. It was called the Vision for Action Committee at the AFBF level. And they recently talked about groups that maybe Farm Bureau isn't reaching, minorities, women, these people coming back from the farm. How can we reach those groups? And I really thought that was great action that Farm Bureau was taking and something that we can continue. And Martha, I do want to get back to the mentoring program, but I want to give someone else a chance to talk. Jared, go ahead.
No, you're just fine. But I think that's a great dialogue to go forward. So, before moving back and being closer to the farm, spending some time in the marketing career, the number of times it takes for someone it varies based on which book you read, right? But it's more than one, right? So the number of times that someone needs to hear something or be exposed to something for it to resonate, is a bigger number. And so one of the things that I think that, and it may be a gap that exists. I think education and career and technical education is playing a vital role, but there may be a gap. If you're a first generation farmer, how do you get valuable on-farm experience? And so one of the things that we've done in our farm is we've had an intern from one of the technical institutions nearby. And so they're able to come and spend 6 months on our farm and see different things. They're able to bring in a new set of hogs and gruel feed and bring them up into getting them up and going. Spend a month in the lambing barn and out with calving and haying and working with our crops. And it gives them exposure to a lot of different things. But one of the things I thought of, this is only 6 months out of the year. And if I was trying to have if I had someone interested in doing this that was from 3 states to the south, they would never see 25 degrees below zero. They would never know the different challenges that we have on the other side of it. And so if you're a first generation farmer or aspiring to be, where do you get that year-round experience to really know whether it's something you want to do? And I think bringing back the whole idea of an apprenticeship in today's environment fits really well with conventional education.
And I think Jenny brought that up great. We need to tap into our land-grant universities. We have opportunities. Yes, they have a 2-year program, a lot of them, but maybe let's take it a little bit step back. I know in our area, if we take a look 20 years ago, I was being called on as a high school student to run a night computer class for the older generation because they hadn't had that experience. Extension does this great in our area, and we need to work with Farm Bureau and Extension and the land-grant universities to have those mini workshops that can lead into experience, entrepreneurship, that type of innovation that we can have lead into and tap into some of the resources. We know we have FarmLink out there right now that could get people exposed. I know on the production side, we need to do a little bit better job on the value-added side, that people are out there and willing to put forth knowledge. And I think it's just tying all those little pieces together between extension, land grant to get there.
It's a great point, Matt, and I love this talk about the apprenticeship too. So, and harking back to how that's something that used to work, and so why can't we bring that concept back and find a way to modernize it and tie in with the technical colleges? And these are some really great ideas here today. But I want to go back to what your first comment was, Matt, that I don't think we've dug into really well. Of there's still the issue of just the general cost, the barrier to entry of being a beginning farmer is so incredible. I think you had said it was less than $500,000 of total income. I think the number I saw was actually $350,000. Even worse. So it sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't when you consider all the costs. And so I wonder if there's some sort of a creative way to find a new funding mechanism for matching grants, things like that. Because the reality is we're probably not going to have additional funding from the government. That's not the current situation we have with our administration, or even necessarily what we think as a group here. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity for something almost like a Shark Tank for farmers. So not so much on a product, but more on the level of, hey, I'm somebody who wants to be a beginning farmer. Here's my plan. Here's what I want to do. Mark Cuban, would you be interested in being a part of this farm? What do you guys think about that idea?
It's so interesting that you bring that up, Martha, because I have another friend who is a first-generation farmer. There's a lot of them out in my area. And one of the things that he talked about is when he got started, he did it with investors. He worked with a farm with investors. And that's an excellent avenue. And I think that Farm Bureau can help us link people up. If people can look to Farm Bureau, and you've talked several times about it, Martha, about how we need the access to the information. And if Farm Bureau can be that place that people like my friend who was scared of Farm Bureau know that they can go to find that information, maybe find investors, throw their idea out there. Another thing that I've seen, and I'm sure you guys saw this, is the AgLink program in Iowa, and there's similar programs in about 20 other states, and it's like a Match.com for farmers. So you have a retiring farmer who maybe doesn't have any heirs, and a lot of our Farm Bureau field staff know these people, and they may not be tech savvy, and there's this website that they may not be able to use. And so you have young farmers, first generation farmers who are more tech savvy coming out of the business industry or coming out of college, and they're putting profiles on there. And their profiles talk about what they want to do and who they want to be and what they want to farm. And if our field staff and Farm Bureau can maybe assist these retiring farmers that have no heirs coming back to the farm in getting their opposite profile to get that match. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Martha?
Yeah, but go ahead, Jared.
I think there's a excellent platform for us to be able to do that through Farm Bureau, and fortunately I think we're sitting on it right now. And if you look at, we've all talked about off the stage here about the value of this experience and how much enjoyment we've got out of it and how much we've learned from it. What about a new yf&R competitive event for first generation farmers? And not that you couldn't certainly compete in the achievement award as a first generation farmer, but a specific division that gives those people a level playing field and really brings some new ideas to light. I think that would be great. And you talk about giving someone exposure to find investors. Your number one source of investment, I think, in your business is going to be from like businesses, people that get it, right? People that can understand your P&L and your balance sheet and your profit and loss statements based on being in your own industry. And so, what a great stage if you're looking to start something and need an investor than this one right here and that audience out there.
Well, let's take a look at what scholarship programs have done for individuals. I mean, scholarship programs were set up to get people to college. We have grants out there that are set up for niche markets. Maybe as Farm Bureau, we need to start looking at some sort of grant niche that are going to allow people to start up that business. I mean, I know in our county, if we could have just one more farm or one more small thing, even if we look at value added, in our area, a lot of programs, our FFAs, small families, they're participating in farmers markets. That's that great avenue, that great starting point. We had somebody else that was in my discussion meet. They transitioned from tobacco to pumpkins because that was that value added. And that's truly, we talked about that early on in our beginning discussion. And FarmLink and AgLink, those are great programs on production side. But let's be honest, we already mentioned that capital is an issue. And by pairing those people up, you can't afford to do it. I know as I'm looking at transitioning with my family farm, pretty much we're paying my grandparents' retirement for the next 5 years because that was how we could afford to do it. And it's very costly and problematic. And I think that true first generation is going to come to those value-added markets, and if we can provide an innovation stage for them, let them compete, provide them with startup money, use investors. I mean, take a look here. We got great sponsorships for activities like this. It is a great platform to start a competition.
One of the things I really like that you said there, Matt, was grants. I don't think we've talked about that yet today. So what about tapping into the philanthropic world out here? So when you look at some of the wealthiest people in the U.S., some of them are also some of the largest landowners. And now there might be multiple reasons why they have that land, but I'm going to guess they have some sort of a passion for agriculture. And I always like to take these conversations back to my own local community. And my family has a farm where there's a retirement community located next to the farm. And that retirement community is one that is geared more towards a wealthier group of retirees. So people that have business experience, legal experience. And what we've begun to notice recently is they're paying attention to our farm. A funny little aside here, they recently put a Facebook post up where they talked about the donkey that we had out in the field that was there to protect the baby calves from coyotes. And they called the donkey Arturo the Burro. For the record, that's not his name, but I love that they are paying attention to what we are doing, and they noticed within 2 weeks of us putting that donkey in the field that it was there, and they felt the need to name it. What a connection that is. And so I wonder, what can my local Farm Bureau do to tap into that of people who are paying attention to what we are doing, but people who also have business experience who could be mentors, and maybe they can even connect us to the Shark Tank concept, right? I'm going to guess these people have an extensive network of people who might have the potential to be investors. So I just wonder if the local Farm Bureau with a situation like mine there, which I know, Jared, where you're from, you might not have that being a much more rural area, but maybe there's even ways for different states to connect together and share these ideas.
And I think what you're saying, Martha, is great, talking about the grants and talking about philanthropic things. I will be perfectly honest, out in my area, I've even seen GoFundMe pages to start farmers market type farms and community garden type farms. And I think that something Farm Bureau could do to hook that up is we have a huge associate member base. And a lot of those associate members are businesses, a lot of those, businessmen, businesswomen, older people sometimes. And a lot of I think that we could really tap into that base and say, hey, we have this outreach program. If you're interested in helping agriculture, if you're an associate member, you probably are. You see what we do. You're probably supportive of what we do. And I think that that could be a way to really get that connection made. And overall, this question talks about how Farm Bureau can help first-generation farmers. And in AFBF policy, the words first-generation farmers don't exist right now. I searched it. And I think it's really important that we take this concept forward in our local state policies and in national policy and focus on making policy to get grants and scholarships, things that you all have talked about, into Farm Bureau policy specific for these first-generation farmers.
Well, go ahead, Jared.
No, I think you're right, and I think one of the, as we I probably discussed in other rounds too, one of the fantastic things about Farm Bureau is you can drive 10 or 20 miles or 40 miles sometimes in my case to your local Farm Bureau meeting and have your voice be heard in a local resolutions meeting that can get moved on and moved on and moved on and end up going into policy. And I know in our policy we're very supportive of increasing the FSA direct loans, increasing the guarantee loans, and I think we had some consensus earlier on that was all, we all agreed on that. But I like the creativity and, Martha, the realism of the fact that in today's environment, agriculture might not be able to get a whole lot of new funding. And so let's bring the creative ideas to the forefront and talk about what we can do there, because there's consensus on other things.
And I think it goes back to the visibility issue again. If we can have it visible in one central location, all of our farm bureaus have web pages. AFBF has that web page. But if we take a look back to your USDA becoming a farmer idea, maybe we need to look at stemming off from that, compiling all this information together. As we did our research, I know a lot of us, we came up with the Young Farmer Loan. We came up with different grants. We came up with mentor programs. But why isn't it in one location? Going back to what we talked about originally, it's scattered out everywhere. We start applying for things. We get junk emails. We get junk flyers. Let's simplify this issue and bring it to a streamline. We talked about the knowledge and having those experts, those mentorships, applying for apprenticeships. We need to have that information centrally located so everybody has access to it, because let's face it, at this current point, yes, we do have that, but that same token, we need to consider that older generation that we had and making sure that our local farm bureaus have it available to them as well in a print.
So one of the things that I saw in my searches, like I would just Google search beginning farmer resources or first generation farmer resources. One of the things that I had to be so proud of that I just thought was so cool was Oregon Farm Bureau's beginning farmer page was like the third thing down on almost every search I did. And I think it's so cool that a Farm Bureau page, a state Farm Bureau page, a local level Farm Bureau page was getting that information out there and had those resources. I mean, they did. They had the whole list of resources. I used the heck out of that page when I was studying. And I just thought that was so cool. Jared, I wanted to jump back to something you said a little bit ago about the changing face of agriculture, and we've talked a little bit about the millennial generation and their desire to connect. There was actually a committee meeting this morning and I'm not 100% sure of the committee name, but I think it's the Direct Marketing and Organics Committee. It's a pretty new AFBF committee. We also have one in the state of Oregon. And that's a group that we haven't connected with traditionally very well. There's other groups that have kind of come up, and those other groups have funding. And there's resources with those other groups that come with those other groups. And I think if we can reach across the aisle a little bit, we have a small farms conference at our land-grant university. This is tying it all together, that we are involved in. Farm Bureau goes to it every year. And I think that there's definitely some options for resources there. Martha, what do you guys have in your state that along those lines?
Well, I love that you're asking what's in my state, because I was going to go back to actually what Matt was saying there. While I like the idea of one central place, I do worry that there are a lot of differences from one state to the next and a lot of communities as well. And so I wonder if we can't just build upon that new farmers website that Secretary Vilsack put together that has been continued with the current administration, and maybe build that and then add links to where each state could have something. That might be a helpful solution. But I also just think we have to continue to focus on the apprenticeship, on the mentorship. How do we help people to understand understand this, because we can build the best website ever, but if somebody isn't telling somebody that it exists, and if someone isn't there to help mentor them and apprenticeship them through it, I don't know that we're going to see much more success. And we still have to continue to focus on this issue of access to capital and the barriers to entry, and find creative methods for funding.
The barriers to entry, the capital, I mean, those programs I think are paramount. But one of the things about starting your own business, starting your own farm, your own ranch, is the support network around you. And think about how many times in our county farm bureaus, in our organizations, in our friend network, in our family, we have people that understand what we do. If we're late for a family event, if we're late for Thanksgiving by a half an hour because cattle got out or something happened, everyone understands that. Think about a first-generation farmer not having their friends, their family, the people that are close to them understand what they do and being able to relate. Think about not having someone that can understand the ups and downs and be able to relate with. One of the powerful things about Farm Bureau, and one of the reasons I think that so many people are involved, the lady that opened the door for us this morning had been a Farm Bureau member for 30 years, and they hadn't farmed in that many decades. But they felt so strong the connection of community, of being involved in this organization. Someone to pat you in the back and tell you, you know what, you're doing a good job on one of those days when nothing's gone right.
Well, and Jared, if we take a look back 20, 30 years ago, Extension used to be in every single county. It used to provide all that information that was there. It would provide the support network that was there. And when you had a troublesome, you had a troubleshooter. We don't have that in every single county anymore. I know in Michigan, dairy alone, we went from 20 experts down to 4. Okay? And yeah, the numbers of those farms have shrank, and they're pretty proportionally, but it is kind of sad that you were talking about driving that 20, 30, 40 miles to get to that information. But we need to take a look at the membership that we do have at hand, going back to what Martha was originally saying, keeping it at the state level. Yeah, we got to have that information that's nationally that's there, but keep it at the local. Have an informational base that's out there, because we are our best resources. When I know, Jenny, you were mentioning your friend in those startups, I'm sure you could reference, hey, I know this person in Farm Bureau. Let me get you in touch with them. Let's put it together, because ultimately, yes, we're grassroots and we drive policy, but it is the networking that we do around these things, whether it's at a table like this or it's at a regional meeting. It's important to have that networking component with knowledge.
It seems like that goes back to the mentoring concept. So, because you're right, there's a lack of funding, and I wish there was going to be more extension agents and more people like that, but it's probably not likely.
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask the audience remain silent for the 1 minute allowed to aid the competitors in their preparation for their closing statement. Please put down your pencils, and in voluntary order, please stand and give your 1 minute closing statement.
If I had to guess, every single one of us here today knows someone who would jump at the chance to be a beginning farmer and rancher if there was an easier path forward. But the reality is, it's a tough path. We talked today about that, and we have to find a way to fix that. The statistics have not been in our favor in recent years, but we have the opportunity to fix that. During our discussion here today, I heard multiple different things that we can do. The first one being Farm Bureau continuing to advocate to reduce the red tape around these programs so that they are easier to successfully access. The second thing being setting up an apprenticeship type program or a mentoring type program where we could tap into former Young Farmer and Rancher Committee members who can help people to understand how to once again apply for these programs. And the third thing I heard is how can we find a way to tap into new funding sources? Maybe it's grants from philanthropic groups, or maybe it is tapping into investors who could be a part of our farms. All of these different path forwards are a great opportunity for our industry.
We covered a lot of ground in this discussion today, as this is a huge topic, and it's one that American Farm Bureau, as the largest general ag organization, can really be central to. American Farm Bureau can be that hub to be information access for these first-generation farmers and ranchers who have never farmed before. I think it's important that we help give them those resources, because if they don't know where to go, they can get lost and they can struggle through that beginning process. In addition to that, once they have the information, we can help hook them up with mentoring programs, as we discussed, and hook them up with the right people, the right programs, with land-grant university programs. Finally, finding creative ways to fund is also something that we discussed, and getting first-generation specific policy into both American Farm Bureau policy and at our state levels, and moving that into the USDA funding program, I think is an opportunity that we should consider and pursue. Thank you.
The average American is removed 3 generations from farming. I think today's conversation, we kind of worked in a circle, because this problem is a circle. It's not just one issue. And the 3 issues that we really identified today was finances, knowledge, and visibility. And I think we really came up with some great stuff out of there. I think the grants and the policy, I think, is crucial, what Jenny brought up, that we need to make sure that that red tape is removed and that we move forward. Jared brought up the excellent point of apprenticeships and bringing those mentors programs in. It doesn't work if it's short term. We need that long-term training. And finally, the visibility. We have to get visible out into the public. Martha brought up the entrepreneurship, innovation, and getting up on stage and having that competition, and it was extremely crucial that we make visible all this information and maybe tie up with the USDA program to get that information out there.
In 1862, the Homestead Act was passed, and over the next 70 years, 1.6 million new farms were created. That was how my ancestors became first-generation American farmers. The challenges today are different. We talked about access to capital. We talked about navigating regulation, understanding all the different ways in which we can find access and tools to succeed. But I think that the biggest thing that Farm Bureau offers is the ability to be a part of a network, of a brotherhood and sisterhood of people who understand who each other are and can relate and help one another out when the day comes that we need it. That is the true value of Farm Bureau, and I believe that that is one of the greatest things we have to offer this next and first generation of farmers and ranchers.
Let's show these competitors our appreciation for a job well done. At this time, I'll return control of this competition to our room chair, Craig Vaughn.
Thank you, Russ, for a well-run competition. The judges for today's competition are Dr. Robert Burns, Ellen Steen, Frank Saldana, Craig Rebish, and Kevin Rogers. I now would like those judges to accompany me to the tabulation room.
Thank you to our judges and timekeeper. We appreciate your help this afternoon. We would now like to ask each competitor to make a brief statement about themselves, their Farm Bureau experience, and their connection to agriculture.
I'm Matt Jackbick. I'm from northeastern Michigan. I'm a third-generation farmer. My grandparents were all Farm Bureau members, so I've been born and raised into it. I attended Michigan State University for 4 years, where I returned back home to help the family cash crop operation of hay and corn, as well as became the agri-science teacher where I work with about 50 FFA kids annually and teach 150 kids daily.
My name is Martha Smith, and I live in Denver, Colorado, where I'm a member of the Douglas County Farm Bureau. I'm originally, though, from Lexington, Virginia, where my family farms cattle, row crops, and hay. I have worked for the Channel brand of seed in Kansas, Colorado, and Wyoming for the last couple years. And prior to that, I've lived in a couple different states where I've been a member of the Illinois Farm Bureau, the North Carolina Farm Bureau, the Hawaii Farm Bureau, as well as currently the Colorado Farm Bureau. And I say that for a reason today because I think I have supporters from all those different farm bureaus here. So thank you all for your support, and truly thank you to the Farm Bureau family. It's really cool to walk in here and get so many hugs from people. It's almost better than going to a real family reunion.
Martha, I think I can safely say it is better than going to a real family reunion. I love this Farm Bureau family. I've been a part of it since the day I was born. My dad is a board member in the state of Oregon, and that's something that I know our family's very proud of. I have to apologize up front because I'm a very emotional person, and so being here on this stage with you all is a dream of mine, and it's something that I've dreamed about since I was 15 years old and competed in the discussion meet at an FFA convention. And so I'm very proud to be here with you all, and I'm very grateful to my family for giving me this opportunity. I'm also very proud to be the Oregon State yf&R chair, just recently elected in December, and I look forward to helping our state continue to grow, and maybe we'll have more people in the Final Four.
My name is Jared Knock, and I'm a member of the Clark Day Farm Bureau, County Farm Bureau back in South Dakota. We live in rural South Dakota. My wife and I, we have 3 girls, and we're raising them on the farm nearby where I grew up. We have a cow-calf operation. We raise and finish hogs. We have a commercial ewe flock, as well as some crops. We also have an egg business that we started. I tell people we're a part of a 1.5 family farm, so there's more than enough work for one family and not enough income for 2. And so we always had the vision of developing our own business, and we represent DuPont Pioneer brand seed, Millborn seeds for cover crop and grass seed, and ABS Global for cattle genetics. We really appreciate, my wife and I both, the chance to be on this stage, for myself to be on the stage and to represent South Dakota. And if anyone is listening, and if I can in any way encourage someone to be a part of a yf&R competitive event, by all means, ask me afterwards what this was like, and I'll tell you how amazing it was. We really appreciate the opportunity to get to know everybody. I thank everyone for your new friendship, and even though we had a lot of connections we didn't know about, and thank you again to the yf&R coordinators for putting this on.
Thank you again to our competitors. I thought they did a fantastic job, and all the competitors over the last 3 days have done a fantastic job. Let's do one more round of applause for all of our competitors. The winner of the discussion meet will be announced during the closing general session later this morning. We appreciate your support for the yf&R program and hope that you'll attend the annual convention closing session. We will announce the winners of all 3 of the 2018 Young Farmer and Rancher competitive events. The closing general session will be held here in the Gaylord Opryland Delta Ballroom beginning at noon. There will be reserved seating for the Final Four discussion meet competitors held up front for you. If we get in. Thanks for attending, everybody.